Yep.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Yeah. So please, love to have you stay. And hello, everyone who's joining. We're still letting people in and getting people through. So we'll get started here in just a minute. Thank you to everyone who's joined so far.
I am hearing some fuzziness, so if everyone can just make sure that they're muted when they're not speaking, please. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Again, thank you to everyone who is signed on and joining us for this, our council meeting for the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program at OPR. We're just going to give people one more minute here to sign in, and then we will get started. As Nikki just mentioned, if you can please keep your line muted when you're not speaking, that would be great, just to avoid background sound and noise. All right, so I am not seeing anybody else in the waiting room, and it looks like we have a quorum for the council, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for joining. It's very nice to see everyone from the ICARP Council here. It's been a few minutes, it has been a few minutes since we've all seen each other and joined in our virtual space. So thank you for taking the time today to join. This meeting is being recorded just for everyone's awareness, and we are also taking minutes, and which will be publicly posted following the meeting. So a few housekeeping items here to get us started, and then I'll do a quick welcome. For today's meeting, we are going to do a deep dive into all the work we've been doing on the Adaptation Clearinghouse and integrating the Adaptation Planning Guide. So we'll be specifically focused in on that for today's meeting. So a few housekeeping items. Again, for everyone who is joined, if you can please keep your line muted when you're not speaking to avoid background noise, that would be great. If we do end up having issues, we'll go in and mute people, but we'd like to have people just have their own control, so so you can speak freely in the discussion portion. So please keep your line muted. We definitely understand in these times people's need to turn their cameras off and step away at times to deal with other issues. So for council members, we definitely understand. Feel free to turn your camera off if you need to at any point in the meeting. But if you are able to, please do keep your camera on as you can, especially in the discussion portion of today's meeting. We are going to manage conversation with the council using the raise hand feature. So if you go to the participants button at the bottom of your screen and hover over your name, you should be able to raise your hand that way. We're going to be tracking the hand raising as we would as a replacement to the name cards that we used to put up for conversation. So please do raise your hand if you want to make a comment or question as we go. If you have any technical issues in the chat function at the bottom, you should be able to message any of us that are hosts on this. So please do let us know if you are having issues, both to the council members and anyone from the public who's joining here today. Please do send us a note if you have technical issues. and we will work with you on that. And then we will, as always, manage public comment. So we will have a public comment period after the agenda items here, and then we will have a general public comment session at the end of the meeting for any items on the agenda or otherwise of interest from the public who want to speak. So with that, I am going to do a roll call here. So I'm going to, when I call your name, if you can please unmute, we will take roll. So first, Jacob Alvarez. Nope, I see you, but I didn't hear you. Yep, okay. Carolee Brown. Tom Collishaw.
Here.
Okay. Tina Curry. Grant Davis.
Here.
Laura Engemann. Jana Gagnon.
Here.
Jason Greenspan.
Here.
Amanda Hansen. David Loya. What's up, David? Oh, there you are. I didn't hear you. Dan McDonald.
Here.
Sona Mona.
Here.
Then for Darwin Musavi, Jeannie Wardballer.
Yep, here.
Andrea Aus.
Here.
Jonathan Parfrey.
Here.
Michelle Pissarro.
Here.
Heather Rock. Lauren Sanchez. I think I saw Lauren here. I think we're having audio issues. Lauren, if you are here, you can chime in. Mark Starr.
Here.
Hi, Mark. Brian Strong.
Here, good morning.
Morning. Gloria Walton.
Here.
No. John Wentworth.
Here.
Right. And Wilma Wooten. All right. Well, thank you all again for joining. Appreciate it. So just a quick notes, and then I will hand it off to Nikki. It has been a few months since we have connected as the council. So again, great to see everybody here. We have a shorter meeting here today. We are going to, as I mentioned at the top, really focus in on the work we've been doing over the summer on the Adaptation Clearinghouse and our work to integrate the Adaptation Planning Guide, which was recently released and updated. And we've been working in very close partnership with Cal OES on this effort. And I just want to do a quick recognition of Nikki Caravelli, who is on our team, who's just done a tremendous job at integrating in the Adaptation Planning Guide into the Clearinghouse. And she's going to walk us through some feedback that we've been getting over the course of the last few months through a series of many different workshops. So very excited to have her share with us today and to get the council's input as well. Before we dive in on that, I also want to share another exciting announcement, which is that we have just hired Juliet Finzi-Hart as the ICARP program manager. So she is here today. Yesterday was her first day, so we're just dropping her straight into things. Really excited to have Juliet and to be able to, now that she's on board, we'll be picking up very quickly here much of the work that we were engaged and working with our council over the course of the first part of the year. So we'll be circling back on especially our work group work. So our partnership with the Department of Insurance and that work group, and then also our resilience metric work. So we will be picking that up now that Juliet is here to help carry that work forward. So you will be hearing quite a bit from Juliet over the, in the coming weeks and months. And we're really also excited now that she's on board to be able to revisit our 2020 priorities that we laid out in our annual report and discussed earlier this year, and especially as we look into 2021, setting our priority and agenda for the year ahead. So very excited again to have Juliet here. And Juliet, I don't see you on my screen, but if you just want to give a quick introduction here, that would be great.
Hi, yes, thank you. Thanks, Nantara. I'm actually, I think it's the other way around where I'm really excited to be a part of this. I've worked with Nantara and the OPR group for years. I've worked with some of you in other capacities. My background is as an oceanographer, and I worked primarily, I was at USGS just previously working on sea level rise. And so even though I'm a scientist, I spend most of my time working with local communities up and down the California coast. So this is really just like a dream come true to have this position and to be able to work with this great team and to get to work with all of you. So thank you, and I'm excited to just jump right in. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And just for a quick roll call, it looks like Tina Curry has just joined. Hi, Tina.
Hi everyone.
Hello. We're just doing introductions and introducing our new staff, Juliet Finzi-Hart. So nice to see you, Tina. Glad you could be here. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand this over to Nikki. Again, tremendous amount of work over the summer to get us to this point. And I also, just especially now that Tina is here, I just want to extend a thank you to Cal OES for your partnership over the last many months and years, really getting us to this point, and just a wonderful partnership around developing the Adaptation Planning Guide and working with us to integrate it into the Adaptation Clearinghouse. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nikki, who will take it away.
Thanks, Nantara. Can you all hear me okay now? I was having audio issues. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Really excited to share with you both the online version of the Integrated Adaptation Planning Guide, if you haven't seen it yet, and also some of the public feedback that we've received. We had a lot of great success at our regional workshop series, so really excited to share some of that with you today. So just to make sure we're all on the same page today, I'm going to cover briefly an overview of the Adaptation Planning Guide and what it looks like in its 2020 form. Then I'll briefly cover what the integration process looked like and public feedback process. We'll go through a tour of the online version on the Adaptation Clearinghouse. I'll open it up for feedback from council members. Then I will recap some of the feedback that we heard from the public, and then invite discussion from council members on how we might prioritize some of the feedback that we've heard, both from council members and from the public. And then we'll wrap it up with public comment on this agenda item. So without further ado, happy to jump right in here. So just briefly, the Adaptation Planning Guide provides guidance to local governments on local adaptation and resiliency planning, as many of us know. It's designed primarily for city and county, but also tribal and regional governments in addressing the unavoidable consequences of climate change, providing the latest adaptation resources and planning methodologies. The first series was created in 2012 as a set of 4 complementary documents. And when SB 246 passed, it required that the Adaptation Planning Guide be regularly updated every time the statewide adaptation strategy is updated. So Cal OES, in partnership with many partners across the state, many of us in the room here, contracted with PlaceWorks and a few others to update the Adaptation Planning Guide after the 2018 update of Safeguarding California. Gathered public feedback and released the final version here in August. There was a public review period in the spring, so now the document is a 250-page single document with a step-by-step process broken into 4 phases. It's designed to be more flexible and responsive than the previous version. And it incorporates a lot of the updated best practices, data, and tools that have evolved over the last 8 years since the last guidance set, such as updates to Cal Adapt and the 4th climate assessment. And it also covers how a locality can meet SB 379 and SB 1035 adaptation planning requirements, and provides examples of how communities can use different types of plans and approaches to integrate climate adaptation into their local efforts. And a couple other final quick notes on the 2020 version. It connects to the statewide vision, priorities, and strategic direction reflected by the ICARP TAC in our vision setting, the Safeguarding California vision and strategies, and connects it to the local planning process. It also includes examples woven throughout of how communities have approached different parts of the planning phase. It's linked throughout to external resources, tools, and additional guidance for diving deeper. Overall, just for comparison to the OPR General Plan Guidelines, the Adaptation Planning Guide is far more detailed and in-depth on the climate adaptation planning process for local governments. And finally, and very importantly, it weaves equity and community engagement throughout. So this is what the 4-phase process looks like. Just as a reminder, I'm not going to go into any detail on any of these, but the first one really designed to make sure you know what you're getting into when you're starting an adaptation planning process, doing the exploratory research work. Phase 2, developing and assessing your vulnerability. And then phase 3, defining an adaptation framework and strategies. And then finally, phase 4, implementing that paper document, making it a reality, and then moving to monitoring and evaluating your progress over time with outreach and engagement woven throughout all of these phases. This is a quick snapshot of what each phase chapter looks like. Not going to go into detail here. And then finally, there's a robust amount of content in the appendices with a glossary of definitions of key adaptation terms, summaries of sector vulnerabilities corresponding with the Safeguarding California sectors. There's an overview of the Adaptation Pathways approach. There's also an appendix listing out key federal, state, and local adaptation planning resources. And then finally, examples of local adaptation strategies by sector. So lots and lots and lots of really amazing content in here. Shout out to everyone who helped make this happen. It's a really great piece of guidance that our communities are lucky to have. So I'll just talk a little bit now about, now that the plan has been, or the guidance has been finalized, the final step for that is integrating it with the Adaptation Clearinghouse, and we're almost there. So I'll talk about the process and the vision here. So our vision was to make this 250-page guidance document as accessible, searchable, easily navigable, and interactive as possible, and ideally interweave downloadable checklists and templates, and connect it to the Adaptation Clearinghouse and make the Adaptation Clearinghouse and Adaptation Planning Guide in one place, so it's a one-stop shop for everything you might need for adaptation planning at the local level. So we worked with Cal OES and the consultant team PlaceWorks and others, and the Geospatial Innovation Facility team, which is our design team at UC Berkeley that manages the Adaptation Clearinghouse, to develop this vision and scope it out over the last couple months, and then turn it into a draft beta version online of an updated Adaptation Clearinghouse. We're now wrapping up our public feedback portion. We did that through September, wrapping it up with this council meeting here today. And then we'll integrate everyone's feedback throughout the next month with the vision to publish on our live Adaptation Clearinghouse, resilientca.org, in November. And this is a quick snapshot of what we did for our public feedback process. We kicked it off with an introductory webinar featuring the Adaptation Planning Guide, a tour, as well as equitable adaptation planning resources. Shout out to SONA and the Greenlining Institute, as well as the Georgetown Climate Center for joining us on that webinar and presenting their really amazing resources there. And then we hosted 9 virtual regional workshops corresponding with the regions of the Adaptation Clearinghouse. We did combine the North Coast and Inland North into one region for that workshop. And then we hosted a web analytics application called Hotjar to enable us to track user movements throughout the site and also to integrate our surveys and data tracking all together in one place. And then, as I mentioned, the TAC meeting is our final stop for receiving feedback. Just a quick note on the regional workshops. They were wildly successful, and we had over 900 people register for at least one of these events over the course of September. We found that it was really effective for introducing new users, especially local government folks, to these resources. A quick note on the process, just after having gone through it, the Adaptation Planning Guide was a lot of content for folks to dig into in one regional workshop. And so in order for us to, if we were going to do something like this next time, I would say maybe we could do a two-tiered approach where for outreach and getting the word out, the regional workshop approach might be effective. But for actually getting really detailed, in-depth feedback, it might not have been necessary to do that for across the whole region, because the nature of the content really requires folks to sit down for a while and spend a lot of time. And that was just really difficult to do in a virtual environment across the span of the state. So maybe next time we might consider doing like a working group with different regional representation, et cetera, but on a smaller scale basis, and then maybe scale up feedback, still do like a survey light or something similar. But overall, my general impression is that the workshops were really excellent, particularly for getting out the word on the Adaptation Planning Guide itself and touring the Adaptation Clearinghouse for folks. So a success overall, but maybe some modifications in the future. And then just a quick note on our Hotjar Analytics. This was a great tool. We were testing it out to see how effective it would be to use to not only for this public feedback process, but for how we might track updates to the Adaptation Clearinghouse over time. So a couple of cool features to Hotjar are that it allows us to track how folks are clicking and moving around on the site. So that first screenshot on the left there is a heat map. You can see where folks are clicking on the homepage of the Adaptation Planning Guide. You can see right away that a lot of folks are going straight to the download button and the introductory button. So you can tell a lot about a site and how it's designed from those heat maps. We also have the recording feature where we can actually watch people in real time go through the site. And Hotjar does not collect any personally identifiable information. So we can't track our users through these recordings. We can only see what they're seeing, but we don't receive any personal information. So that was also really cool to see how folks are moving around, what types of decisions they were making, what buttons they were clicking on. And then our final main feature that we had from Hotjar was these little pop-up feedback widgets, which we thought might just provide another way for folks to provide feedback if they didn't make it to a regional workshop. And those little feedback widgets actually weren't all that popular. Most people did not choose to engage with them and just hid them. And the majority of the feedback that we got was from the analytics and the survey and the workshops. So I'm gonna pause there and see if any folks have any questions before I dive into the tour. Any clarifying questions?
Looks like Brian Strong has his hand raised. So Brian, we'll go to you.
Yeah, just really quickly, I mean, I think it looks great, and I know I participated in part of one of the workshops, the Bay Area workshop, and had a number of staff. So I thought it went really well. I thought Nikki did a really great job. I wanted to ask, what is the relationship with UC Berkeley and the Geospatial Innovation Facility? Do we have a contract with them? Are they doing this sort of just out of the goodness of their heart, or what's that relationship? And then a similar question around Hotjar, like is that again something that we are paying for, or how were we able to sort of get them on board?
Yeah, so we have funding from FEMA, and Nuatara can correct me on this because she's much more familiar with the contracting side than I am. But we had FEMA through Cal OES and FEMA funding to do the adaptation planning guide integration. And so we use that funding to pay geospatial innovation facilities with I think we have 2 contracts through them, one for regular Adaptation Clearinghouse updates, and then another one for the integration side. And then for the Hotjar, we used just regular ICARP funding. It's, I think it's like $40 a month for this service, and we'll probably be wrapping up our use of it in the next month or so.
Great, thanks.
I would just add quick, we've had the contract with the UC Berkeley Geospatial Innovation Facility to develop the Adaptation Clearinghouse from the beginning of getting the site built and ready. So they've been on contract with us for a few years now. Just for context too, they are also the entity that has, that does the web development for CalAdapt. So as a reminder, CalAdapt hosts all the downscaled California specific climate projection data. And because we each have contracts with them, it actually has enabled us to be able to look at how we can also better integrate CalAdapt and the clearinghouse as well. So just a quick context note, additional detail there. It looks like, sorry, John Wentworth is next. John,
Nikki, for the for the Sierra Nevada, which can you just there are a number of different workshops and things happening over the last couple of months. Which workshop was the one that you used for the outreach for this great looking website for the Sierra Nevada region?
Yeah, we partnered actually with Sierra Business Council and CalAdapt to host a longer workshop on September 29th. So that was a 3-hour workshop.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great. It doesn't look like there's any other questions at this point. So Nikki, we'll hand it back to you.
Great. I'm really excited to show you the online version. Let me switch over my screen share here.
We need background hold music while we do the screen share swaps.
Okay, so you should now see the development site with folks installing solar panels. Let me know if you cannot see that. Okay, great. So for those of you that haven't seen it yet, welcome to the beta version of the Adaptation Clearinghouse integrated with the Adaptation Planning Guide. A couple of things that you'll notice right off the bat is we tried to make some overall site improvements as well in terms of design, cleanliness, and appeal factor and whatnot. So right off the bat, you'll see just starting from the top, now we have a glossary. So now folks, if you're coming across a acronym or a term that you haven't come across before, you can click on that and learn what that means. We also made the suggest a resource button more obvious and upfront right on the top. And now you can also access this search all resources. This goes to the main site search. That used to be in the main navigation toolbar. Now we just made it into a button that is accessible throughout the site, no matter where you are. We changed the navigation, and I'll dig into that a little bit more in a little bit. And then we made this huge search bar here front and center in the main part of the screen so that folks know that that's the main point of the site. That's the first thing that you're attracted to. We added some highlights for the most popular resources on the site, or the things that we wanted to really highlight. And then we changed the formatting of the featured resources, the recent additions, and the most viewed. And so just a quick comment, we're looking for feedback, and we've invited feedback from the public as well on all of the changes to the site, not just the Adaptation Planning Guide. So TAC members are welcome to weigh in on any of this and give us suggestions for how we can improve this design. So yeah, a lot of great changes to the front page. Diving into the navigation, the main change is that we added the Adaptation Planning Guide. So now you can see all of the main components of the Adaptation Planning Guide up front. You can enter any of the chapters here. You can also see the supporting resources. So right at the bottom, you can jump into a statewide adaptation efforts page. You can jump into the appendix content for supporting resources. You can check out the example adaptation strategies and appendix content on the sector vulnerabilities. And you can also jump into the Adaptation Pathways content. So I'm just gonna jump right in here to the home page of the Adaptation Planning Guide. You can immediately access all of the chapters. This is pretty much the same as the navigation toolbar in terms of what's available here, except for the exception that you can download the Adaptation Planning Guide right away and all of its 250-page glory. And you can also view the highlights on the Adaptation Planning Guide and jump into the introduction. So I'm just gonna click through each of these sections so you can see it all, starting with the introduction. So this is the home page for the introduction. You can download the introductory chapter. This is where you would go to understand what the purposes of the Adaptation Planning Guide, general resilience requirements for local general plans, so SB 379 information, how to use the Adaptation Planning Guide, what climate adaptation planning is, an overview of statewide climate adaptation efforts and the climate adaptation sectors, and important considerations for starting, such as integrating equity and addressing uncertainty. I'm just going to scroll through so you can see some of the design aspects of how we integrated the content here. So moving on to the phases. Similar structure to the introduction, we have a home page for each phase. On the left, you can click to view the resources, which are just actually at the bottom of the phase 1 page. So this is just linking down so that you, in case you miss the scroll, you can click on it. But this search feature, we have all of the resources now tagged by phase. So these are all related to phase 1 in this search area here, all of these resources on the clearinghouse. Scrolling back up, you can also download the phase 1 chapter, and you can also download a zip file of all of the templates and checklists that we developed for phase 1. Then you can click through each phase here, or each step of each phase, excuse me. Not gonna scroll through everything, but just an example of how templates are highlighted, various resources are highlighted and linked throughout, etc. So phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 are all organized the same in terms of this design and this layout with the downloads and everything in the same structure. But we did want to test out a different layout just to see if there was one that might work better than the other. So phase 4 is organized a little bit differently. So you can see that the downloads are actually on the right here in this design, and also the phase by phase navigation is on the right, and supporting resources here are linked. And then to access the stepwise content, you click here. And then to access the resources for phase 4 in the clearinghouse, you click on that tab. So we definitely would love your input on the difference between the two designs, if one seems more intuitive or easier to use than the other. So those are the phase chapters. just click through some of the appendix content here. We have state, federal, and non-governmental resources highlighted here. These are all from the appendix content with overviews and links. Going back to the home page, I'm going to click on the Adaptation Pathways content. So this gives an overview, some technical details, and then steps to how you might take an adaptation pathways approach. I'm moving fairly quickly here, so just because there's a lot on here, but as we invite you to receive feedback, I'm happy to continue sharing my screen, and you can say, hey, can we look at phase 1 again, or like whatever aspects if you want to see something a little bit closer later. So the last part of the adaptation planning guide content that I want to feature here is the way that we've organized the sector information that is in the appendix. So tying to the existing adaptation topic pages, we made a couple of modifications. So I'll just jump into the agriculture page real quickly. But we've organized it so that the overview is on the same page. We redesigned the featured resources, and the search is still the same, but we added some of the adaptation planning guide appendix content into these tabs here. So this describes the vulnerability and climate impacts content from the appendix for agriculture. And then the example adaptation strategies from Appendix D are also highlighted here with the resources linked on the right. And a quick note about how we organize the topics, which we received a lot of feedback on, is that we organized it so that we're just testing this out, but we wanted to see if we highlighted the 3 most popular topics pages, which we found from our analytics, were these 3, the equity, investing in adaptation, and the land use and community development pages. We wanted to see if that would make it easier for folks to access what was already apparently like really important and really popular. So that's why we decided to divide the topics in this way, but we're not confident we got it right. So I'd love your feedback on that. And then the rest of the topics are accessible here. And then just a quick note on the land use and community development page. We are planning on putting the plan alignment tool on the current Adaptation Clearinghouse integrated into this page. So it's not on here yet, but that is it. In case you're wondering what happened to that, the plan is to put it on here, but we're welcoming any ideas for how to do that differently. So that's all of the adaptation planning guide content. I'm going to briefly highlight a couple other things and then wrap up the tour here. So we were trying to experiment with a couple of different ways to portray the case studies. This is actually still in development here. So the case studies works roughly the same, and the blank tiles here, this is just a technological glitch. So we actually didn't really make hardly any changes to the case studies page. Just a note on that in case you're wondering what's going on there. And then the tools and data page, we made a couple of changes. So we wanted to make it easier to distinguish between the different types of tools that folks can interact with on the site. So this first tab here on the right, that takes you to a search for all of the tools, data sets, and research. That's similar to how it is right now. And then we separated out the state resources into a different tab. So this is just the 4th climate assessment and the CalAdapt content. And then we wanted to find a new way to portray everything that was in our tool table. We had a table of featured tools where we tried to make it easier to understand the differences between various climate projection and modeling tools. That table on the original site is pretty clunky. So we wanted to make it into a more interactive decision-making type of tool. So we created this tool comparison feature. So now you can see all of the 24 tools that were previously in that table format on the previous site. They're all organized a little bit differently in this block format, with a similar structure where you can see the climate impacts, the topics, the outputs, the data resolution, etc. And now you can filter each of them by climate impact. You can click on multiple impacts. And so now it's showing only 12 of the 24 tools. You can also add on additional topics. So now it's only showing 4 of the tools. And we thought that this would be a little bit more helpful for folks who are trying to wade through all of the different tools that are available. And the final change that I want to highlight is that we just shifted the background and how-to pages a little bit. So this is what the background page looks like now. And then we reorganized the how-to, creating a frequently asked questions structure. And here's the screenshot of how to use the site search. Oh, I didn't even show you the site search. Okay, I gotta do that. There aren't a whole lot of changes to the site search, but we did add a couple things. So the main thing that was added was now you can filter all resources here on the left by planning phase. The look and feel is a little bit different. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to highlight about this. I think those are the main changes on the main search. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my tour and invite folks to provide feedback. What do you think?
Great. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you again for all of your work. We do have a couple hands raised here. So we're going to start with Jonathan Parfrey, and then we have a running list. But Jonathan, you're up, and then I will call on other council members.
Thanks, Nu and Tara. And Nikki and the whole OPR staff, mega kudos. What a tremendous updating of the clearinghouse. It's just so impressive. I mean, I think when it comes to the clearinghouse overall, the way that you've created hyperlinks and improved navigation is going to make the user experience so much easier and understandable. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so therefore the other shoe drops where I have some critiques. So first critique on the APG. I think when we talked about this before, and perhaps funding isn't available for this, we were kind of thinking about TurboTax, you know, like if you choose A, then a slew of options open up. If you choose B, then other options open up. And it strikes me that the choice in placing the APG online has made navigation and made what would be a hard copy a lot more digestible, and I think kudos for that, but it doesn't have the iterative setup that I think we were possibly envisioning. And so I'd like a response as to the choices related to that. And then a suggestion related to that. You know, and this is gonna sound like a non sequitur, so hang in there with me. You know, my son used to play World of Warcraft, and he would make videos of himself playing World of Warcraft. Why people do this, I have no idea, but, you know, and they'd always have some heavy metal music in the background while they're playing these games. I don't get it, it's not my thing, but maybe something similar could take place with somebody from a city. Like, let's say Brian Strong would volunteer to walk through some of the city of San Francisco's choices related to the APG, and there could be a video of helping perhaps you know, municipalities that don't have a tremendous amount of resources, or they don't have the ability to hire consultants, to be able to walk through and develop some, using the APG online to develop plans. Something like that as an explainer video, or 2 or 3 given different parameters, could be very helpful. And then a nitpicky thing. on the homepage of the Adaptation Clearinghouse, the first image you see, there are some things about that image I love. I love the city background. I love people in the shot. Great, great, great. But that's a very low albedo rooftop that you're showing, which is not very adaptive. I'm sorry, it's just my worldview here. And solar panels. Now, people associate solar panels with mitigation, and currently, according to the ARB, it's around 14% of our emissions come from the electrical sector. So, I mean, I think maybe there are other images out there that could convey adaptation and not mitigation, but there are certain elements of that photograph that I adore. So that is, those are my very brief comments, and I cede the floor.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maybe I will do a quick response on a couple things and then hand it to Nikki to fill in her additional thoughts here. So first, yes, on the homepage for photos, if people have suggestions of other photos that you think would be better reflective, please send them in, or representative, please send them in. Always looking for suggestions on photo improvements. They turn out to be quite difficult to reflect everything that you want to in photos. So really appreciate that. One quick note is that when you come back to the site, that photo rotates. So that's not always the landing page one, just as a note for people. So if you go to the site and you see a different one there, it rotates through. Each of the photos that are on the different topic pages show up there in rotation. On the video piece, Jonathan, actually, we have been talking about doing a video kind of orientation. And for those who are familiar with the US Resilience Toolkit, they have a video that you can walk through to get oriented to the site. We've been thinking about something like that, but I also love the suggestion that you provided of being able to do some, what sound, at least how I heard it, some like video case studies approach of having actual jurisdictions or users go through and show how, how the APG can be realized through a plan, an actual plan. So love that additional suggestion, and we will continue to think about that. I'm going to hand it to Nikki here now for anything else you want to add in.
Yeah, a quick note on the video or the case studies idea. So the video we have is just for like a tour for folks that didn't have access to a workshop to help orient first-time users. So we definitely are considering doing that. For case studies on how folks are using the Adaptation Planning Guide, Cal OES, actually, their Civic Spark fellow from the last service year worked on a couple of case studies already, and those are written out that Cal OES has of folks using the Adaptation Planning Guide. And so we're working with Cal OES to put those into a format on the Adaptation Clearinghouse and highlight them. So not quite a video, maybe that's something that we can consider in the longer term. And then regarding the comment about the TurboTax options, I think, there was a lot of pie in the sky ideals about like how we could make this as interactive and awesome as possible. There's so many interactive things that we could do. A lot of great website models out there, but ultimately we had a very, very short timeline to vision it out and to make it happen over the summer. And so this is the best that we could do in the time and the resources that we had. But I think if we do have more funding and more chances to iterate on this, we can definitely build the interactivity over time.
Great, thank you, Nikki. Okay, so next up I see Michelle, and then we will go to David and then John Wentworth. So Michelle, you're up.
Thank you, and congratulations. I really, this is very impressive. So, and especially in light of everything else that's going on, that you're able to pull this off, I think it's terrific. One thing that I am thinking about, maybe it picks up on what Jonathan was saying a bit, but if I'm doing a project or I'm trying to do a countywide plan, I keep thinking about, well, how do I integrate mitigation efforts and adaptation efforts? I see these as like two sides of the same coin, and in many ways you can create these, you know, kind of optimized outcomes. And maybe it's within the site here, and I, you know, just to be honest, I haven't been able to go through it all, but where are there opportunities really, or just ways to direct people to help them to think about this in a holistic way, and create some efficiencies. And I see in mitigation, greenhouse gas mitigation really as a resilience strategy, right? It's sort of addressing the main driver that's exacerbating our issues and need to adapt. So, you know, are there opportunities, I'm just thinking of either through another tab, to direct people, just to acknowledge the synergies to it, and then you can also just direct them to different places, other state agencies where there are programs that fund mitigation. Like I think of, there could be the California Climate Investment, and this may exist, so please, it's just my own ignorance right now, or to the, you know, transformative climate communities or Department of Conservation. They have a big tool for countywide planning for mitigation. Is there a way to help facilitate that bridge and to get people thinking about that? So when they're going to do a countywide plan, they can almost pull in both efforts and try to create more synergies across the board for climate action. And this may be true in just some of the case studies that are featured too, and just helping to educate on that. And then of course, I'm just thinking of other photos and just nature-based strategies. And so, you know, and that's a place where, right, these things often come together. If we think about wetland restoration or urban forestry, or even fire, addressing fire and heat island effects. So, so those are just some of my immediate thoughts, you know, on how do we just try to facilitate and create these bridges.
Thank you, Michelle. Nikki, those are all great suggestions. Nikki, anything you'd add in?
I think on the mitigation front, those are all really interesting ideas that we can definitely think about, like maybe a topic page or something like that. Just a quick note on what is already there, not saying that this is really answering the heart of your suggestions, but we do have a topic page dedicated to energy. So that is one area where folks can kind of explore this idea of the mitigation adaptation nexus. And then on the adaptation planning guide content in the introduction, I believe both in the introduction and throughout the guide, there is attempts to interweave mitigation in some aspects of the guidance in here. So if I might not be able to find it through a quick skim here, but climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. Okay, so this is a brief introduction to how folks might be thinking about this, but it's not necessarily highlighted. So that might be something that we could consider highlighting on the APG homepage, you know, creating like some introductory highlights or something, pointing to some of the suggestions that TAC folks are having right now.
Great. So next up is David Loya.
Yeah, first I just want to acknowledge, as Jonathan did, that it's an amazing body of work in a very short period of time. You know, web pages are really hard to develop, and there's kind of like both ends of the spectrum where you just don't have the content. Obviously the content is here, and then once you have a volume of content, organizing it effectively is really challenging, and I think you guys have done a great job of that. And so I wanted to thank OPR staff and folks who worked on this, and then in particular folks that worked on the adaptation planning guide in the very beginning. I also want to thank Jonathan for putting this image of Brian in my head, sitting in a really cozy recliner with these headphones on, walking through how to do sea level rise with heavy metal playing in the background. It's going to stick with me all day long. So a couple opportunities on the website I was thinking about. You know, one, I did attend one of the workshops, and Nikki, you did a great job. I just wanted to thank you for, you know, taking the roadshow virtually across the state. You did a great job of walking folks through that content. I appreciate the critiques that you gave of the that program yourself. I think those are very valid, and I think walking people through it in more detail at a later date would be great. Which kind of gets to one of my points that I think technical assistance on this body of work is going to be important. And I'm not exactly sure how OPR can roll that out, but actually taking maybe groups of folks that are working on these these planning processes right now and walking them through how to use this guide for their particular purposes, as opposed to just having folks walk through the website and tell others what they think. So if OPR could put on some kind of a more granular technical assistance for people who are actually working on adaptation planning, that would probably be helpful. And I like Jonathan's idea too of somehow making it so that as you work through the information, it narrows the field of information that you're looking at towards those topics that you're looking at. Because there's a huge volume of information out there. And then one more idea for the website, the content that I like the way that you put the topics that are most clicked on, as a quick resource for folks, because those are probably going to be the ones that many people are looking at. If there's any way to highlight the topics that people aren't looking at, on sort of a rotating basis, that'd be great, because then things don't get lost in the shuffle. And lastly, I don't know if there's a way to do this, but it'd be cool if there was some sort of, there's a huge volume of technical resources here. If there was a way to bring to this web page the human resources and a networking opportunity. I don't know if that's through a listserv or some way of just having folks who are have gone through this process before and are available to consult on it. In particular in the resource areas, that would be a really great addition as well. But overall, I mean, I'm super impressed and wanted to thank everyone who's worked on this.
Thank you, David. Couple things. We are definitely scoping out, and I know Nikki is excited to think through the technical assistance side of things. So now that the site is, we have a little bit more to go on the push to kind of incorporate feedback and launch the APG integration, but absolutely trying to think through how we could do more direct technical assistance now that we've gotten through this phase. So if you all have specific ideas or examples or requests for how we might be able to do that, please let us know, because I know Nikki is starting to already think about that. So very much appreciate that. I think on the network kind of human resources piece, the one thing I would say is we have been trying to think through how we could facilitate that through the Clearinghouse, recognizing the Clearinghouse is just a website. It is not, a phone line or, an interactive space for practitioners to come together. So it is something we continue to try to think through. I think, honestly, it is a resource capacity issue on our side, because actually managing a network and community of practice takes constant feeding and interaction. And I think we're just trying to think through how could we do that given our resources that we have. So again, would invite anyone who has ideas or thoughts on that to share, but just wanted to note that it is something we would love to figure out how to move forward. And I know there have been a number of conversations over the years of, trying to stand up a climate services type kind of program that would do that, or, function that would do that. So yeah, just a note, appreciate the ideas and would love to continue thinking through that. Okay, next up here, I believe, is John Wentworth.
Good morning, great to see everybody. Good morning. Couple boneheaded questions. When will the site be live? Second question, can we share the URL to the development site? On the engagement, I think Jonathan and David echoed this, is hit on a key need, and Brian, the same thing. And so we can all put our marketing hats on. We all develop websites. We all know what personas are. And I think between the group of the TAC, we could identify 4 or 5 or 6 different personas that we could put onto the site. Hi, I'm from a rural area. Any one of us would be willing to do a very simple recording on our screen. Here, 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 here. Go and knock yourselves out. Easy to do, very simple. This site is so powerful and it's got so much stuff in it, we need to do that. So I'm personally volunteering to do that for the rural folks because I think that's, I saw, Nikki, in your analysis of the results coming out of this, the rural folks, I think they're confused, I think was the word that you used. And I think it would be a very easy thing. I think hopefully we're not the only confused people in the world, but it would be a very easy thing to set that up from a persona, a sequence of encounter, to get them to the rich set of need here to be able to do that. The other thing is that I'm hoping, there's been a lot of things happening very quickly. Nuintara, maybe you could speak a little bit about the shared stewardship agreement that the governor signed between the state of California and the U.S. Forest Service. The governor is very nice to hear him mention the 47% of the land mass of the state that is managed by federal partners. There is another group that the Forest Service has done a very important vulnerability assessment, the U.S. Forest Service Sierra Nevada Recreation and Infrastructure Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Strategy Partnership. That is not an example of how to name your website and your working group. But there are, I think it's a very important thing, we can talk about this later, how to bridge that federal state gap. And so that's something we can talk about. And finally, for case study opportunities, if you could give us some insights into how to nominate candidates for that. Those are my questions. Thank you very much. Excellent work.
Nikki, do you want to take the first few and then you can hand it off to me for other ones?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So the site will be live early November. I don't have a date, but it will be in November, hopefully early. The development site will be available and live. We'll be making changes to it throughout November. We won't be accepting feedback on it just because we'll be working on it and no longer able to make real-time changes based on public feedback, but you can share the development site. I really like the idea of having like maybe a user testimonial type of thing, maybe that council members or other folks record videos of, and then we put it on the site. I'm not sure exactly if we can do that in a short amount of time or what, but I like the idea generally. So thank you for that suggestion. And then for how to nominate case studies, so using the suggest a resource button is the easiest for us. So folks can suggest an idea for a case study and what would be in that case study and who ICARP staff would work with on them. And the process for that is once we have an idea, then we ask folks to fill out this format. It has a series of questions and it's a whole template with directions on how you input this information, and we share examples of how other folks have created a case study. And then we just iterate on it a little bit to make sure that it's all clean and fits the format and information of all the others on the site. And then as long as it fits the requirements, like it fits within the 10 or so challenge areas or whatever that we have featured here, then we add it to the site.
Great. And John, I think on your point on the shared stewardship agreement, I can give a very high level, but I'm not going to be able to get into the details of it. I think we could look at potentially for our next meeting, seeing if we can get someone who could give more detail, substantive information as it fits into our broader resilience agenda. And we can also make sure that the link to the shared stewardship agreement is included in the notes and sent out for people to reference. But yes, there was a shared stewardship agreement signed earlier this fall, and really what it does is it lays out a joint framework between federal and state actors especially looking at doing a joint stewardship plan, really to increase the pace and scale of forest and rangeland stewardship efforts. So it is a very significant step in terms of moving alignment on federal and state stewardship of especially forest and rangelands. Just recognizing the scale of federal lands in California and the proportion, in so much of the forested lands that we are trying to figure out how to manage our wildfire risk and other goals too. So this is a significant event and opportunity here for us. So I won't try to go into any more detail than that because it is outside of a bit of my area. So, but we can look to bring a more focused conversation on that at a future meeting.
Yeah, and Nikki, just to be clear, the thing I was mentioning is called persona development. And it's a key thing in marketing and website development. So I could do maybe rural recreation kind of things. Jonathan could do whatever his thing is. Brian could do San Francisco urban kinds of things. So you could have something right on the homepage. Who are you? I am this. Boom, quick video, sequence of encounter that gets us to the TurboTax thing. You wouldn't have to do anything with the site navigation, but you could lay out a very simple sequence of encounter to get someone who can identify with a certain persona. Okay, now I'm where I want to be, and that's all I'd have to do. And I'd certainly volunteer to help out with that if that would be helpful.
Great. Okay, so I think we've got up next, Jacob Alvarez is next. And then we are going to, Nikki has a few more slides to go through here. So I want to make sure she has an opportunity, and then there'll be more opportunity for discussion here. So Jacob, you're up. But Jacob, we can't hear you for some reason, sorry. It doesn't look like you're muted on our side, but I'm not hearing any, no. I'm not sure. We've been experiencing this phantom Zoom volume issue lately, so I'm not sure because you're not showing up as muted. No. Maybe while you're troubleshooting on that, we will come back to you because I definitely want to be able to get your input here. I do want to note, I think Jana, you sent over some design suggestions to Nikki, so just wanted to recognize that we got those and we'll be bringing those in. I don't know if you wanted to say anything quickly.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, Jacob, great.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I don't honestly know what happened there, so just played with it a little bit. My comments are just real quick, and congratulations. I think this looks great. I'm in the process of updating and revising our city website, and the task sometimes seems like, oh, just get something done really quick, and a lot of times it's a lot more than that, especially with having already with all the content available, and then trying to figure out on the fly with the web developer what's the best widgets to use in order to get this colossus amount of data across, and it's basically you get 4 widgets, go, and then you're like, okay, I got that down, and then you're like, okay, well, what color palette do you want? So it's very time consuming. You're making decisions on things you didn't think you thought would already come pre-set. So just a kudos to you. And I wasn't going to say anything, but my tech colleagues are what I say is better than coffee. You guys got me juiced for the morning. So thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. Okay, any other quick final comments on this, or Nikki takes it back? In the interest of time here, I know we're only set to go to 11:30, so I'm gonna maybe ask Nikki to go through these next few slides here quickly, and then we'll be able to have a little bit more discussion with you all before we sign off. So So Nikki, I'll hand it to you.
Great. Thank you all for those great feedback and comments. Okay, so I just wanted to cover some of the feedback that we heard from our public feedback workshop series. Give me 1 second while I pull up my notes. Okay, so first of all, the overwhelming response was really positive. So on the screen, I just wanted to give a snapshot of some of the verbal feedback that we received in our survey. Looks great, a ton of information. That was like by far the most common comment, just people saying like, wow, it's a lot to sift through, but it looks great. A couple of folks providing specific comments about how they're planning on using it, for finding success stories and examples, for examples of implementation, the emphasis on outreach and environmental justice. Most folks seem to think that it was pretty easy to use and intuitive to access. I just want to make a couple of quick notes about the overall data that I'm also about to show you in a quantitative format. So it may not be totally representative of the entire intended audience for the online adaptation planning guide and clearinghouse. We received about 213 survey responses from workshop participants, but many of those folks did not answer all of the questions in the survey. We organized it so that we got folks' first impressions right off the bat, like real quick reactions, and then kind of tried to guide folks deeper and deeper and deeper into the site to kind of give them a roadmap for exploring and providing feedback. So can you find what you're looking for? Like, can you access the main search page? How's that working for you? Now dive into the more technical topic pages and the phase content. And at the end of the survey, most folks didn't quite get there. It was a lot to get through. So just anyway, there is, because of that, there's an inherent kind of potential response bias to those who had stronger feelings and thoughts about the online guide. And those folks were more likely to respond to all of the survey questions compared to those that maybe didn't have as strong thoughts or feelings. And so looking at the written responses, participants who had extreme thoughts or feelings on the developmental site answered all of the questions, whereas those who were less engaged likely just didn't really give very detailed responses and didn't finish the survey. So just a quick note on that. So this is just a quick snapshot of who our workshop participants were. The vast majority were state agency and local government staff. So about 39–40% local government members, which is awesome. And then 27% state agency staff, followed by 16% CBOs or nonprofits. And then about 12% would consider themselves regional agencies. And then a very small percentage of like academia and like other community types. We also asked folks in a Zoom poll in each workshop a couple of different questions just to understand their baseline. We asked folks what their experience was with climate adaptation planning. About 44% of our attendees consider themselves beginners, 36% moderately experienced, and about another third advanced. Only like 8% of folks said they had absolutely no experience with adaptation. And then we asked folks if they had used the Adaptation Clearinghouse before. Most folks had not ever used it, never been on it, never heard of it. 43% had not used it. 35% had used it maybe once or twice, and then the rest use it sometimes or frequently. That tracks with our web analytics. We asked folks if they were familiar with the Adaptation Planning Guide before the workshop. 43% again said that they had no familiarity with either version of the Adaptation Planning Guide. About a third were familiar with both versions, and then the rest had either seen only one or the other. So just to tie all of this together, we got a lot of local government and state folks in the room who had never seen the Adaptation Planning Guide or the Adaptation Clearinghouse or considered themselves beginners into the room and gave them a tour of all of these resources and made the connection to how it can help them achieve their adaptation planning goals. So that in itself feels like it was well worthwhile. Just a couple of insights from the feedback and the responses to those Zoom polls that we did. Overall, it appeared that urban regions had greater experience and familiarity with the adaptation planning resources that were out there compared to the rural regions, who felt like they were swimming a little bit more, felt a little bit more overwhelmed when they visited the site. And there was also more comments from those rural regions about the lack of resources that we had in the clearinghouse for them, such as on air quality and wildfire. Moving on to some of the quantitative feedback, we wanted to make sure folks felt like they could find what they're looking for. That's the main point of the site. And so we asked folks to rank various statements on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree with the statement and 5 being strongly agree. Overall, a plurality of folks ranked questions or ranked their answers at a 4 and a 5. So that means that most people felt it was pretty good. There were a few tweaks that we could do, but for the most part, it met their needs. So about 64% of folks said 4 or 5, that the site met their ability to find what they're looking for. Whereas about a third of folks felt middling about it, and only 4.5% strongly felt like they couldn't find anything. And some of those folks self-identified as, hey, maybe this site wasn't built for me, not with me in mind. We also asked folks if the main search page met their needs, just to hone in on that, make sure that was still working well. 72% of folks said it did. So again, ranking a 4 or 5, yes, it meets my needs. 24% felt middling, like, maybe some improvements. And then only 4% felt strongly that they could not use the search. We also asked folks to rank the amount of content, because recognizing that the adaptation planning guide and the topics pages is a lot of narrative and there's just a lot. And so we wanted to see if there was, if we should maybe be cutting down on some of that, or maybe add a little bit more. Recognizing also that in putting the guide up, we did make some simplifications, some condensing of the content. We wanted to make sure we did a good job on that. The vast majority said that the content and the level of detail was just right. So it was about 85%, specifically for the introductory content, felt that it was just right. Whereas even more, 91% of folks felt that the actual phase chapters had just the right amount of content. If anything, folks felt like, just going back to the previous slide here, oh, excuse me, okay. So if anything, folks felt like there was maybe too much information in the introduction, as you can see by the green slice, and then too little information in the phase chapters, if we were to make any modifications. Speeding right along here, here's a snapshot of some of the heat map data that we got. So you can see that people are using the main search bar and the main search buttons. And then actually they're accessing the adaptation planning guide from this main banner button as opposed to the navigation, which was really interesting. So that makes us think about how we might organize the landing page a little bit differently. But by and large, the biggest takeaway from this snapshot is that adding this main search bar into the main banner was a really great decision. And then going to the phase chapters, a lot of folks found this design really attractive and intuitive for how to access the different parts of the adaptation planning phases. Noticeably though, there's not a whole lot of clicks on the resources or download buttons. So maybe we might want to think about how we can highlight those buttons a little bit more. So this is just a quick summary of some of the qualitative feedback that we received. And I'm gonna invite some feedback from council members on what we should prioritize on design level stuff, given that we only have about another month to make sure that what we've already done works really well. Some of the bigger picture stuff, the bigger questions, bigger structural changes or interactive features, we simply just don't have time to do a lot of that right now, even if we want to do that. So keeping that in mind, this is at a high level some of the feedback that we received most commonly in verbally and qualitatively from the surveys. So suggestion to streamline the topics. Folks did not like the breakdown between the sector topics and the 3 popular topics. Folks wanted us to bring them back together or reorganize it. That was confusing. Most folks preferred the phase 1 through 3 layout over phase 4. Folks had trouble sometimes, beginners using the search, they wanted example keywords to use. So just a couple of examples of common search terms was requested pretty frequently. There's also a request to streamline the navigation. As we saw from the heat maps, a lot of folks actually weren't using the main navigation. Maybe they felt it was just a little too much. It was just, each button was kind of organized a little differently. So when you're just getting oriented to the site, it's a little bit difficult to sift through all of the adaptation topics and a really confusing navigation. So that was some of the feedback we received. Also some suggestions about the homepage, like can you make it more clear on the homepage, like what the point of the site is. For the adaptation planning guide homepage, there are a couple of suggested improvements, a few minor streamlining search requests, and then overall there's a lot of links on the site, and so a lot of folks recommended making sure that those were working well. So this is all short-term, more feasible stuff that we're thinking of doing over the next month. And then a couple of midterm, more time-intensive things that were common feedback. The biggest one was folks wanted a legislation summary page. They really want to know, what are the main regulations applicable to me? Make that like easily accessible and available like right away and put it all in one place. A lot of folks, especially from rural regions, had requests for just more resources, definitely, always. And then a couple of folks did say that there was just a lot of text throughout the site. So not specific to the adaptation planning guide, but throughout the site, maybe we can, if we can cut down on text where possible, we can do that. And then some longer term, maybe less feasible feedback that we got was folks were confused about why we didn't have topic pages dedicated to climate impacts, and wanted to know where they could go for that. One potential way that we can quickly address this is make a better connection to the 4th climate assessment resources and website. We don't have that as front and center or easily tied to the topics pages as we do. But in the longer term, it may or may not be valuable to create topics pages by impact. And then another big feedback from, especially from the Inland South and a couple of other inland regions that do experience air quality issues more than coastal regions, is that why isn't air quality a topic? Why isn't it a prominent impact that we can search for on this site? So with that, I think that's all of the feedback, the recap of the workshops. Again, I think overall great success, a lot of really valuable information and relationship building happened during this tour. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the public feedback and how we might prioritize some of that going forward. Nuantara, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so thank you, Nikki. So in the interest of time here, because we only have 5 minutes left for our scheduled meeting, I think what I would ask is if anybody has a very quick kind of burning comment or feedback around the prioritizing, you know, the many things Nikki just went through, please raise your hand. Otherwise, what I may ask in the interest of time is for council members, if you could please just send any thoughts over that you have to Nikki in an email, and then we will make sure that that feedback and your comments get integrated into the meeting minutes, just to make sure that everyone in the public gets to understand, you know, your feedback and gets to see that. So I might ask if we can take that approach just in the interest of time, because we do need to allow for public comment here. So unless anybody has any burning, you know, points that you can make in a very, very succinctly, I will ask that TAC members just send your thoughts on prioritization via email. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands. So I will, oh, Grant I see Grant Davis's hand physically.
I'm sorry, it's not burning. I'll put it in writing. It's good. It's a great product.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Grant. Yes, looking forward to seeing your follow-up note. So with that, I'm going to see if there are any comments from anyone from the public who is online. And if there are, if you can please raise your hand as well, and we will call on you. Okay, not seeing any. We will then wrap up this item for the meeting. Really appreciate everybody's feedback on the clearinghouse. I think that was tremendously valuable for us to hear and to get your input directly. We will definitely look forward to your additional feedback on helping us think through prioritization of what we heard from the public through all the workshops that Nikki organized and in partnership with many of you. I didn't note earlier, but I do want to also really quickly thank Jason Greenspan and SCAG for partnering with us on 2 of the workshops and also sharing some of the regional resources, planning resources they've developed too. So thank you for all the council members who helped us over the last month or plus in these workshops. So appreciate that. As I noted at the top of the meeting, this obviously was a deep dive on the clearinghouse, and we are set for our next meeting to be in December. That we are planning to have that be, as we have with our previous meetings, have that be a more expanded conversation on a number of the different council work areas. In the intervening months, we are planning, once we give Juliet maybe a couple days to settle in, we are planning to again pick up our work through the work groups. So you will be getting a lot more communication from us on many of the different policy areas that we've been focusing on. And now that we have Juliet here, we'll be able to drive those forward more. So our next meeting, just as a note to everyone, will be be able to cover and address many of these other pieces. So with that, I am going to see if there's any final comments from the council, and then I will do a final public comment here. Any final thoughts from council members, including, topics? John, we heard, the question around the shared stewardship agreement, so adding that in. Any other topics anyone wants to bring up here for future meetings? And as always, you can send along thoughts too. You can send them to Juliet, and her email will be on the next slide. So you can send additional thoughts as they come to you to Juliet. Okay, so with that, any general public comment on any item we've discussed here or otherwise? Okay. So Nikki, if you'd go to the next slide. Thank you. So here is all our contact information, including Juliet's new address. So thank you all for taking the time to be with us here today and for your input. And we look forward to connecting very soon. Thank you all. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good job, team.
Thanks, Brian.